Check mic 1 2. Test 1 2. Perfect.
Okay. Why when I speak it's making this noise?
Check sound. Check sound 1 2. Okay, okay. Don't worry. Yes, yes.
Good. Check 1 2. I'm doing it right? Check, check. It's okay?
Perfect.
But it's too high. I say here, like this. What?
No, this high from you are انت هون لانه هيك مشان هيك لو هيك عالي. هيك عالي انت.
لا.
بس انا اللي عندي لورا مره عالي.
اوكي. لكن هذا نخليها عالي ولا ننزله؟
لا لا هيك
هيك مليح. اوكي.
بس انت قربي على المايك.
هيك. شكرا رامي. Rami, you give me a sign when you start the. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, dear distinguished guests here present with us. Good morning to everyone who is following us online. We are happy to have you all here for the day on the very important topic on the Transformative Climate Finance Day. There have been 3 organizations working together to co-curate this day as part of the thematic days of the Water Pavilion, Water and Climate thematic theme of the COP. So I would like to invite first our organizers of the day, and I will start with Mrs. Marie-Laure Vercombre to welcome you for the day. Please.
Hello, dear colleagues, dear friends. I'm very happy to be here today, opening the Transformative Climate Finance Day on the Water Pavilion. The French Water Partnership has been participating to the COP since COP21, and it's amazing to see how far the water community has gone since then, how dynamic we are now. The partnership of many organizations, which we can see here on the wall, in creating a Water for Climate Pavilion for the first time at COP26, and every year since, really allowed us to be heard and to be listened to at COPs. I would argue that COP28's presidency program on water is clear evidence of that. Thank you for the pavilion coordinating team at CIWI for their hard work, their dedication, and their patience. As much as it is necessary for us to be between water actors to exchange and coordinate, it is essential that we open up as well to other communities to break the silos. Energy, agriculture, forest, ocean, you name it. But one field, one community will allow structural transformation to reach water resilience, and that is finance, one of them, of course. Water is at the heart of our societies, and it is crucial that climate finance properly addresses our water challenges. As negotiations enter their final stretch, I really do hope that we can reach a satisfying agreement on the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement and on the global goal on adaptation with strong language on water, which could eventually attract more finance. The programming today at the Water Pavilion will help us as Water for Climate Coalition to learn and progress in economics and finance literacy. I will end with a huge thank you to our co-curators, the Global Water Partnership and the Green Climate Fund. We're delighted to be able to work on this with you. Thank you.
Thank you for French Water Partnership, and I would like to invite now our colleague from Green Climate Finance Fund. Sorry, it's all about finance, right? So Bapon, please, Fakhruddin, the floor is yours.
Good morning again, everyone. It's been a pleasure to be here on this transformative climate finance for water security. It's our pleasure to be part of this organization, as well as we like to thanks again organizer as well as partner to having the day. As you maybe saw that the way the climate finance work, it go through a framework which called NDC and NAP process. Undoubtedly, 87% of the global NDC acknowledge that water is their highest priority. But even though there's not much climate finance actually drop down to water sector. And is this the financial problem, or is this the coordination problem, or is it vertical or horizontal problem? We maybe need to look at that quite deeply. But also the commitment that the COP made on the water sector, I think that's promising for this year. And the amount of effort has been made for water security aspect since beginning of this year with UN Water Summit, then Water Week, and all sort of commitment. We need to make sure that actually how that commitment transform into an action, and how actually we package a innovative solution or transformative, what we are talking about here this day, a transformative adaptation for water security that could be actually our target and goal, and how actually we enhance or support our countries to packaging those kind of project, mobilizing the financing. From GCF, we have a strategic plan for water security, and we like to see actually how country could adopt that water security strategy to accessing more climate financing. We so far actually mobilized $3.5 billion, and which actually milestone for several great projects on the water security aspect. But many countries require similar kind of project, but it requires a country priority as well as packaging such kind of project into look at climate action. So with these things, I again actually like to welcome everyone for this particular session, and we like to see a COP declaration on water, a huge commitment as well, so that actually climate finance not only go to the other sector, water get a more priority. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bapon. It raises all our ambitions for the day, what you were saying. Colleagues, we have the honor today to have with us the Dutch Special Envoy for International Water Affairs, Mrs. Maaike van Ginniken. As Water Envoy, Maaike raises awareness, builds coalition across countries and organizations, and shares know-how for a water-secure world. Van Ginniken is a recognized water leader who has helped to provide millions of people with access to water and sanitation and energy services. Van Ginniken has pursued executive headquarter position at international organizations with extended periods living and working in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. She served as a UN Assistant Secretary General at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, as a Chief Executive Officer of SNV Netherlands Development Organization. Mrs. Maaike headed a knowledge-driven organization with 1,400 specialized staff working on food, water, and energy. Between 2002 and 2017, Mrs. Maaike held various leadership positions at the World Bank. She managed the World Bank's US $5 billion energy portfolio in West and Central Africa, and its $6 billion water portfolio in South Asia. I'm honored to give the floor to Mrs. Maaike for her to give us a keynote speech for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that kind introduction. And good that all of you are here in the morning. And good for everybody online. We don't realize, but it's Monday morning. So online, good luck with starting your working week. People experience climate change. Let me see whether this works. Uh-oh. No, do I switch it off? There. People experience climate change through water. Let's not forget why we're here. Your home flood, your harvest fails because the rains are too late, your cattle dies because there's a drought, or there's no longer no longer water in your tap. So for the first time in history, we've pushed the global water cycle out of balance. That's also what climate change means. Rainfall, the source of all fresh water, is becoming more erratic. We have floods, we have droughts, and especially droughts. They're not always on television, but they're misery in slow motion. They're actually one of our biggest problems. So we have no time to lose. If climate change manifests itself through water, water can also be the engine of climate adaptation. So let's not think about the water as a sector, but as the element that actually connects climate change to many other sectors. So what do we need to do? 3 things. First of all, to adapt to a changing climate, we need to deploy the best engineering and technology. We know a lot, we've learned a lot. Let's make sure that all countries, all community have access to that technology. Think about coastal protection, irrigation, climate resilient water infrastructure, early warning, early action systems, really important. But we also know that with just engineering and technology, it's not going to be enough. So let me mention 2 other things. First, we can only adapt to a changing climate if we let water and soil guide our economic and spatial planning. I put water and soil together because actually a lot of our water is green water, which is in our soils. So our soil quality is crucial to water availability. What does this mean? It means that we need to realize that with a changing climate, we cannot do everything anywhere anymore. We can no longer grow avocados in the desert. It probably was a bad idea already, but with climate change, we really should stop these kind of things that mine groundwater. We cannot build homes in the floodplains or in deep polders. It's a big discussion in my country. So we need to rethink where we grow our food, where we build our cities, and where we plan our industries. And thirdly, we can only adapt to a changing climate if we restore and protect natural freshwater stocks, because those are our natural buffers. If climate change is about droughts and floods, our saviors are the buffers we have in nature. It's our wetlands, our rivers, our lakes, our groundwater, our aquifers, very important. We need to realize that 99% of our freshwater stocks are actually stored in nature. And I was very happy that yesterday the Freshwater Challenge that focuses on this specific issue got so much attention, so much energy. I thought it was one of the most high energy sessions we've had at the COP with 37 countries pledging to contribute. So very nice. I'll get to finance because these actions require huge cultural changes. They require changing our governance. They require involving citizens and communities. And they require a lot of money, huge investments. And if we think about huge investments, let's also explicitly say that it requires that we change what we tax and what we subsidize. Okay, let's go briefly to my country. I come from the Netherlands. I still don't know how this works. Yeah, there it is. If you turn it around 45 degrees, you actually see even better that it's a low-lying delta. We're part of 4 transboundary river basins. In the Netherlands, we've battled against water for over 1,000 years. We canalized our rivers, we built dikes. We just tried to get all the water out as soon as possible, drain the water out, make the country a sieve, get it away. But in the past 25 years, with more intense rain, longer dry periods and rising sea levels, we've actually realized that that idea of battling with water is no longer viable. So now we're working with nature, we're working with water. So we're embracing nature-based solutions, we're giving room back to our rivers, and restoring our floodplains, so there's storage capacity for where the water comes down the rivers. And earlier this year, the Dutch Parliament actually adopted a policy that makes water and soil guiding principles in all our spatial planning decisions. So we've always have a culture in which the government just protects you against water, and now it's a risk-based approach. It's really a difficult transition in our psyche. So let's zoom into finance. Still trying to figure out my clicker. There. These are the changes you see in the Netherlands. Let me first say a little apropos. I know that climate adaptation finance is not the same as water finance. But if we define water as the organizing principle of climate adaptation, I think as water professionals we need to look at all climate adaptation and not just at the narrow sector of water finance, because very often then you talk about wash and your sewage pipe needs to be a little bit wider, and that's all true. But we really need to take a holistic approach. So there's a large overlap between climate adaptation finance and water finance. The other thing that's important to realize that it's actually really difficult to define climate adaptation finance. You can say that climate adaptation is doing everything you need to do anyway, doing it a little bit better. So if you do a project, how much of it is climate adaptation, how much is stuff you already need to do, infrastructure you already need? I know there's really beautiful ways to measure this with the MDBs, etc. But we need to realize that this is very much an integrated approach. I warn you, I have quite a lot of bad news in the coming 5 minutes. Let's first look at the climate adaptation finance gap. This is a report from UNEP that came out about a month ago, and it indicates that adaptation financing gap is actually widening. UNEP estimates it at between 194 billion and 365 billion per year. Those are the green arrows. The red arrows are actually the international adaptation finance. I think it's a bit of a weird comparison, because I don't think anybody thinks that the only way of financing climate adaptation is actually donor money. But it's huge. The numbers we need are huge, the gaps are huge, etc. So we have a big problem. So at COP26 in Glasgow, we actually prioritized adaptation. And we agreed, the countries of this world agreed, or we urged, I think it was, but let's say agreed, that we would double adaptation finance by 2025 compared to 2019. Well, look at this graph. It's from the OECD recent report. We're failing, right? We're not there. And actually, I mean, you have to be careful with year-on-year comparisons, because sometimes it's just a few big projects in one year and the other. But look at it. We're going up nicely and then, oh, we're going down. So not good news. Actually, the latest OECD figures show that adaptation finance fell by 14% between 2020 and 2021, which is the last year OECD has numbers for. As the Netherlands, we think that adaptation finance is very important. In general, climate finance, we increase it from 1.4 billion to 1.5 billion by 2025. We allocate more than half of our public climate finance to adaptation. And importantly, that half is all grant-based and geared towards strengthening the resilience of the most vulnerable countries and communities. We hope that other countries will do the same, because still a lot of finance, there's not enough finance in general, a lot of it goes to mitigation and a lot of it is not grant-based. Okay, I hope you're ready for some more bad news. These are also OECD figures on private finance, private international, private climate finance. And if you look at it, this is by sector, but overall only 9% of private finance, private climate finance in developing countries between 2016 and 2023 went to adaptation. I think that's actually not a surprise, because adaptation is mainly a public good. But you see the same numbers if you go to the database of private finance in infrastructure of the World Bank. You actually see the same for water. In that database, water has been around 5% of total private investment in infrastructure in developing countries for decades. Gone up 0.5%, gone down, but I mean, nothing going up, nothing. All these efforts we've put in, we find this very difficult. And actually also there in 2022, investment commitments in the water supply and sanitation sector decreased to 2.3 billion. That's actually a 48% drop compared to the previous 5 years average. And because it's a 5-year average, it's actually more worrisome, right? Because it's not just a year-on-year variation. What do we learn from this? Well, first that we're all very depressed now. But let's look at what we actually can do as action. I think the first thing, and I don't hear enough about that on this COP, is that climate adaptation requires very distinct financing approaches from mitigation. It's different, it's not the same. And these approaches need to be centered around patient public capital. As I said, climate adaptation is a public good. What does that mean? It has large economic benefits, but it generates low financial revenues. Because you cannot say, oh, the flood protection protects you, but not you, right? Adaptation infrastructure lasts for decades, sometimes for centuries. So you need money with a very long maturity, and you need financing with low interest rates, because with high interest rates, these long payback, I mean, it's unaffordable. And adaptation projects are often complex, site-specific, and our whole international financial system is based on project-based finance, which has very high transaction costs for these kind of projects. And few countries have moved to sector-wide financing approaches, which are less transaction intensive, but that's a discussion we need to have internationally. So I think one of the things we need to do is actually find ways to translate these huge economic benefits of climate adaptation and of water management into financial revenue streams. And this is not easy, because it's not possible everywhere. But actually we're doing a pretty bad job where it is possible. We talk about the user pays principle, about the polluter pays principle, we're actually not implementing it. So if we start with making water users pay for water, whether it's farmers for irrigation water, whether it's households and enterprises for drinking water, and we make polluter pay, at least we have some revenue streams. It doesn't solve everything, but I think we need to do much better on that. A third lesson learned is that we need public financing. It's essential for bridging that huge adaptation finance gap. And we talk a lot about international public financing, but let's also think about national public financing. And here I want to talk a little bit about the wasteful subsidies that we see. Look, if you... Oh, I had a little lady here in between. No, she's gone. Oh, good. The lady I'll send to you by email. If we see here, you go around these pavilions and you see protests against fossil fuel subsidies, right? I mean, in my own country, it's on the newspaper. People are aware that these are wasteful subsidies that give the wrong incentives on the climate mitigation side. You never hear the same story on the climate adaptation side. And I think there's a story there to tell as well. And most of this is about agricultural subsidies. Some of it is also about water subsidies. Let me actually use some of the data from the World Bank, which are about agriculture and fishery subsidies. A recent World Bank study called Detox Development found that governments are spending worldwide $635 billion on inefficient agricultural subsidies that are making climate change worse. $635 billion. Think about these figures we had earlier. No, there were 10 billion here, 20 billion there. If we can only solve half of that, it's a huge change. And why are these agricultural subsidies making climate change worse? Water is often subsidized for farmers, so they lack incentives to adopt water-efficient practices or to just turn off their pump. Subsidies make water dirtier by incentivizing the overuse of fertilizers. And worldwide, agricultural subsidies are responsible for 14%, 1/4 of global deforestation. So these are not zero subsidies. These are not subsidies that don't help. These are subsidies that move us in the wrong direction. And we really need to think about subsidy reform, which is not the same as just take them all away. But if that huge amount of public finance that's caught up in these subsidies, we can actually make them incentivize farmers to use less water. We can make these subsidies still help poor people, poor communities, people who need them, but in a way that they're incentivized to adopt climate adaptation measures. It's a huge amount of money that's available. Now we go to this gentleman. While we work to increase the overall volume of finance from all sources flowing into adaptation, we must also continue our efforts to improve the quality and accessibility of it. It's very difficult for communities. When I was at IFAD, I think we did a review that showed that I think it was about 1.6%, less than 2% of climate finance, international climate finance, actually goes to smallholder farmers. This guy is the guy who needs the Climate Adaptation Summit. Some of the big firms might be able to get it elsewhere. But that accessibility for poor communities is something we need to work on together. We're working on this. The Netherlands is a founding member of the Champions Group on Adaptation Finance, but a lot more progress is still needed. So it's pretty grim. I want to give you a little bit of hope, and I get that from my own country, the Netherlands. So let's look at how this works in the Netherlands. And the first point here is actually that governance and financing are really interlinked. So you need not only financial revenue streams, you also need strong public institutions if you want to fix the financing puzzle. So in the Netherlands, all water service providers are publicly owned and operated. And at the center of our water management are the 21 regional water authorities. They have a very long history. The first regional water authority in the Netherlands was actually set up in the 13th century as a group of farmers and citizens coming together, realizing that they had to work together and had to raise funds together to protect against floods. And it was our first democratic government body. So it's a specific layer of our government system in between the municipalities and the provinces. These regional water authorities are responsible for water allocation, for flood protection, and for water quality. Of course, the other layers of government are important as well, and I just put the European Union in there, which is a supranational layer of government, which actually has become an important policymaker on water issues in all EU member countries. Flood and drought management is expensive. And it will only become more expensive as the climate changes. In the Netherlands, we collectively spend approximately 8 billion euro per year on water service and water management. This is a sum of tariffs, of government expenditures, of everything. It's about 1% of our GDP, and we have a pretty large GDP. We're only 20 million people, so this is how expensive it is. And I realized that some of the expensive solutions in the Netherlands might be out of reach for some other countries. How do we finance this? 20% of it is financed by the central government through a long-term Delta fund. I think the key thing here is that it's actually a long-term fund which is determined for multiple years, so not very impacted by changes in government, changes in public financing. The rest is financed by subnational governments through taxes and tariffs. So actually, it's mainly by these 21 regional water authorities. They actually finance their service delivery mostly from water taxes, which are based on real estate property value. Collection rates are 97%, so everybody pays their bill, which means that the revenue streams are considerably. And because these water authorities are only responsible for water management, this revenue stream, by definition, is earmarked for water, right? It's not in the municipality where the mayor can say, oh, now we're going to spend it on education. These earmarked streams are important. These water authorities provide good services. Homes rarely floods. Household businesses and farmers and landowners are really happy to pay their taxes. Why I spend some time on this is that I think these are the kind of virtuous cycle that we want to install. A lot of utilities, a lot of governments around the world and their citizens are caught in a low equilibrium. You don't pay, I don't provide services. We need to get to an equilibrium where it is, I provide services and you do pay. How we get there is difficult, but I think it's at the crux of getting, in the end, the financing. So water authorities, based on this revenue stream, actually borrow cheaply from a public water authorities bank. It's here on the left. It's a public bank that's co-owned by the provinces and the water authorities themselves. And because there's so much revenue and everybody pays, etc., this public bank actually has a AAA status and attracts patient private capital at low interest rates from the private sector. I said earlier, project by project is difficult. This is sector by sector. It's not project by project. In the Netherlands, if you build a dike or you do a nature-based solution, you don't have to kind of come to financial close and go to GCF and the World Bank and whatever for each project. And I think internationally, this kind of sector-wide approach is really necessary for climate adaptation and for water. Here's the lady. You see? That's the financing fossil fuels. She ended up in the wrong place in the presentation. So I want somebody with stop financing, stop harmful agricultural subsidies here next year, or stop harmful water subsidies. This is what happens if you have harmful subsidies. And this is the report I mentioned earlier. So, let's not forget what this is about. It is about making sure that people, communities have sufficient water through droughts, through floods, because we know these are going to be worse with climate change. So let's make water the engine of climate adaptation. We know we need huge investments, and that starts by ensuring, where possible, that we create revenues, that users pay and that polluters pay. But we also know that climate adaptation is a public good and we need patient capital. And we know that a lot of this will have to come from governments. Repurposing subsidies is an important element. It's politically really difficult, right? Farmers don't come like this lady with a little placard. They normally come with their tractors to parliament. International public adaptation finance is also a really important element. Believe me, also in my country, it's also politically very difficult. But this is why this COP matters. This is why people here are negotiating about these kind of issues. And this is why we come together in the Water Pavilion and everywhere, so that we get our act together, we get our narrative together, we know what to ask, what to push for, so that in the next COPs and the next COP, we get climate adaptation more in the formal text, and we get water as the engine of climate adaptation better recognized. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your keynote speech. At the same time, scaring us, but also inspiring us to do more, to bring more money to the sector. I now would like to invite Mr. Alex Simalabui, Executive Secretary of GWP Southern Africa and Head of Climate of the Global Water Partnership. Mr. Simalabui has over 20 years of experience in high-level public policy engagement and advocacy on climate-resilient water investments. He is a strategic, visionary leader with a unique blend of skills in resources mobilization, communication, and partnership development, with degree in civil engineering, MBA, and public policy from Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. Alex, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to our high-level guests. Also the keynote from the special envoy from the Dutch, our good friend, Mekve. Also to welcome the online participants. This session is being broadcast in hybrid format as well. So we'll have an online audience. So I think for me, it's just to thank the organizers of this day, the French Water Partnership, Green Climate Fund, and of course the Global Water Partnership. So we are grateful. We have a whole day of interesting sessions to build on the context that has been laid. I think on the opening day of the water pavilion, I did talk about what this session will run and how it will go. So it's really about transforming finance, and I think it's not just climate finance. I think this has already been well articulated. It's looking at all the different financing sources. But money is not the only issue. It's also about the opportunities. Where are the investment opportunities? We're not calling them challenges anymore. We're calling them investment opportunities for adaptation, for development, and for building resilience. So the way it's going to run now is that we will have a number of case studies that will be presented during the course of the day from specific countries in terms of what challenges they are facing, what opportunities they have, and how do they see moving forward in terms of implementing key solutions that can help to build a resiliency around water, but also looking at the role of water to adaptation as well as in mitigation. So we will have a couple of sessions which will highlight the investment opportunities, starting with the needs, because if we don't know the needs, we talk in generalities. So we'll have case studies from around the world, specific cases in terms of what are the needs. Then we'll also have another session which will talk about the financing sources and opportunities. And here it's not only GCF. I know GCF is part of this, but we all understand that it's only a small part of the adaptation and resilience story. So it's looking at the whole range of financing sources. And on this, we'll also draw on the work that has been done by the OECD. I think you've done a fantastic job, Meg, in terms of highlighting some of the financing sources. But we'll also draw inspiration from the work that has been done by the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments for Africa, where they have identified a pyramid of investment sources, really categorizing where the investment opportunities are, how much, and what do we need to do to be able to tap these financing sources. Of course, the context is Africa for that report, but globally applicable. Then we'll have, of course, a session where the government of Korea, together with the government of Botswana, are convening a session on innovation. Because I think Meg mentioned that we need engineering and technology as one of the key interventions. We need to restore fresh water. And as part of that, we also need the innovations. So the Korean government of Botswana, with support from the Global Water Partnership, will convene a session in which they celebrate innovation from what they call the change makers. They've been running with GWP support, change makers competition, over 300 applicants, identifying climate resilience innovative solutions that are really at the micro level, but need to go to scale, and really putting a spotlight on this. So you're all invited at 1 p.m. It will be over lunch for that celebration event of the winners of this competition. His Excellency, the President of Botswana, Masisi, announced the winners during the high-level panel event on water at the hosted by the African Union on the 2nd of December. And now the session will be celebrating the winners. So you will have a lot of young entrepreneurs joining online youth. They are not here physically, but we're looking forward to lots of energy around that. And then, of course, in the afternoon, we'll have a session around, at the end of this, nothing really can move much without political support. And the public sector needs the private sector. The private sector needs the public sector. So there will be a high-level ministerial at the end of the day to bring all this together in terms of, okay, we have these opportunities for climate finance, we have these challenges, we have these sources, we have all these innovations, and we have the COP in terms of what has happened. I think Meg mentioned that the Freshwater Challenge was really energizing. I attended a part of it as well, mobilizing over 37 governments with the COP presidents to really put water at the center of the COP. But it's still not there. It's still a bit of, water is still being sprinkled here and there. We're still really not there. So we'll have ministers responsible for climate change and environment, as well as Minister of Water present at the end of the day to talk about financing, adaptation, resiliency, and in the context of where do we go from here. So this is basically how the session is going to run for the Climate Finance Day. So thank you very much to our guest of honor, the speakers, and the partnership. And we're really looking forward to moving ahead and taking this forward. I know you probably have to leave very soon to go to the airport, but we're very grateful. The Netherlands have been a great partner in terms of really championing, and we're looking forward to the COP in the next COP. Is it not? We don't know. Baku. It's going to be in Baku? Yeah, so we'll continue the conversations there as well with the Green Climate Fund and our partners. So thank you very much. Let me hand over the session to our competent MC for the day, Sarah, and let's give a round of applause to our high-level guests.
Thank you very much, Alex, and all colleagues. I think we are having a good, exciting start of the day, a lot to discuss, and Alex has took us already through the program. Let's start our day with our first session, and let's hear from the countries their experience on how to define their needs, but also how to mobilize funds for their needs. We will hear from countries, but we will also hear from the World Bank to set us the scene on what can be done to assist the countries. So may I ask my panelists to join us? Can I?